Cinematic wide shot, courthouse steps under the morning sun. A police cruiser screeches to a stop. Officer Rebecca Thompson steps out, her badge gleaming like a weapon. Her voice cuts through the calm. People like you don't belong in places like this. Standing a few feet away, Judge Marcus Washington, calm, composed, and dignified, doesn't respond. He's on his way to start court. But before he can take another step, slap! The sound echoes across the marble steps. Phones come out. Cameras record. The world just watched a white cop assault a black federal judge outside his own courthouse. For a brief moment, Officer Thompson smirks, believing her badge makes her untouchable. But what happens next will end her entire career and change the justice system forever. Real justice moments like this remind us that truth always finds its way to light. So before we begin, drop your country or city name in the comments. I'd love to see how far this message travels. And if you believe in justice over power, hit that like button and subscribe, because this channel stands for stories that speak truth to power. The courthouse at Maple Avenue wasn't just another government building, it was a symbol of fairness, a place where truth was supposed to speak louder than power. For Judge Marcus Washington, it was sacred ground. Every morning, he arrived early, carrying not just case files, but the quiet dignity that came from years of serving justice. Marcus wasn't born into privilege. Raised by a single mother in Atlanta, he learned early that justice wasn't always blind. Sometimes, it needed people brave enough to make it see. His rise to becoming one of the youngest black federal judges in the state wasn't easy. Every step of his career came with whispers, doubts, and the constant reminder that men who looked like him were expected to defend themselves, not deliver verdicts. But Marcus never fought for fame. He fought for fairness. Every decision he made inside that courtroom came from one principle: justice must protect the powerless, not comfort the powerful. That belief made him admired by citizens and quietly resented by a few inside law enforcement. One of them was Officer Rebecca Thompson. Thompson had served on the city's police force for 17 years. On paper, she looked like a model officer, decorated, disciplined, and fearless. But beneath that badge was a history buried under paperwork and silence. Complaints of racial profiling. Reports of excessive force. Allegations that never seemed to stick. Each time, the system protected her. Supervisors dismissed accusations, calling them misunderstandings. Her confidence grew. Her arrogance too. To her, the badge wasn't just authority, it was immunity. The morning of the incident started like any other. The courthouse parking lot buzzed with early activity, lawyers rushing in, journalists setting up, and security officers greeting familiar faces. Marcus had just parked his black sedan in his reserved spot, carrying his leather briefcase. The same briefcase he carried since his first day as a judge. That's when Officer Thompson arrived. She was already in a foul mood, angry about being reassigned to courthouse security after a disciplinary warning. When she saw Marcus's car parked slightly over the white line, she saw not a federal judge, but what she wanted to see, someone she could belittle. "Hey! You can't park here," she snapped, slamming her car door. Marcus turned calmly, showing his ID. "Ma'am, this is my designated space." But Thompson didn't care. She saw his calmness as defiance. She stepped closer, her tone sharp. "People like you think you can do whatever you want, huh?" The words hit harder than she realized. Decades of quiet discrimination, of subtle disrespect, condensed into one sentence. Marcus stayed composed. "Officer, please step back." That's when she did the unthinkable. She shoved him. Hard. The briefcase fell, papers scattering across the concrete. Then came the slap. Loud. Echoing. Recorded by 2 courthouse cameras and a dozen cell phones. Marcus didn't respond with anger. He didn't raise his voice. He simply picked up his papers, adjusted his tie, and walked silently toward the courthouse doors. What no one knew was that this calm, quiet man was already preparing the most powerful legal response she'd ever face, not as a cop, but as a defendant. Because in that moment, she hadn't just assaulted a man. She had struck at the very symbol of justice itself. And for that, justice was coming. Inside the courthouse, whispers spread faster than wildfire. What had just happened on the front steps wasn't rumor, it was caught in full view of half a dozen witnesses and 2 security cameras. But even more damning, it was now trending online. Within 20 minutes, the video of Officer Rebecca Thompson striking Judge Marcus Washington was circulating on every major platform. Marcus, meanwhile, sat silently in his chambers. His cheek still burned from the slap, but his focus was somewhere else. He wasn't thinking about revenge, he was thinking about accountability. He had spent his career defending others from people like her, but now, for the first time, justice had a face. A face with a badge. Security officers entered his office, their expressions tense. "Judge Washington, she's been detained, but the department's already trying to downplay it." Marcus nodded slowly. "Of course they are." He looked up. "Make sure every piece of footage is copied to an external drive and timestamped. No one touches that evidence without a court order." He knew how easily things disappeared when power was threatened. While Marcus prepared his legal motion, the scene downstairs was chaos. Reporters were already gathering, demanding statements. Officer Thompson sat in a holding room, her face pale, hands trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. Her phone buzzed nonstop, calls from union reps, department lawyers, and friends telling her to stay calm and don't say a word. But arrogance dies hard. When the internal affairs officer entered, she snapped, "That man disrespected me in public. I was just defending myself." The officer raised an eyebrow. "That man," he said quietly, "is a federal judge." Her mouth went dry. Upstairs, Marcus was already in motion. He filed a judicial misconduct report, attaching the footage as primary evidence. He requested an immediate emergency hearing, invoking federal jurisdiction on grounds of civil rights violation and assault of a judicial officer. Within hours, his courtroom, was packed beyond capacity. The irony was sharp. The same hall where Thompson had strutted in confidence was now where she would stand in shame. Marcus entered the courtroom not as a victim, but as the embodiment of law itself. The murmurs died instantly. His black judicial robe flowed as he took his seat. Cameras flashed. The nation was watching. "Officer Rebecca Thompson," his voice began, calm but unshakably firm, "you stand accused of assaulting a federal judicial officer, violating civil rights under color of law, and committing acts unbecoming of your sworn oath." Her attorney, hastily assigned by the union, stood. "Your Honor, my client was under extreme emotional distress." Marcus cut him off. Distress does not justify violence, especially from those sworn to uphold peace. The courtroom was silent. Every word carried the weight of centuries of injustice finally confronting its mirror. He pressed a button on the monitor. The video played, the shove, the slap, the sneer. Gasps filled the room. Every angle was clear, every insult audible. Thompson's voice echoed. "People like you don't belong here." Marcus paused the clip. His eyes scanned the room. "And that," he said quietly, "is the problem with our system. Officers who think law and order only apply to people who look like them." Thompson shifted uneasily, her confidence cracking. For the first time, she understood the depth of her mistake, not just career-wise, but morally. Marcus continued, his tone steady but filled with conviction. "This case is not about me. It's about every person who's been silenced, humiliated, or brutalized under the weight of unchecked authority. Today, this courtroom will remember what accountability looks like." He signed the order authorizing full prosecution under federal civil rights law, bypassing local interference. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, the first of many. Outside, protesters gathered in support. The video had ignited something larger, conversations about police power, racial bias, and the long overdue demand for change. For years, people had begged the system to listen. That morning, the system finally spoke back. And it spoke through the voice of Judge Marcus Washington. The following morning, the courthouse felt different. It was packed wall to wall, officers in uniform, reporters with cameras, citizens who had watched the viral video 100 times replaying the same question: would justice finally hold one of its own accountable? Judge Marcus Washington entered the courtroom with the same composure he carried every day, but this time, something in his eyes had changed. Calm, but resolute. The quiet before a thunderstorm. He took his seat at the bench. Every eye followed him. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced, his voice trembling just slightly. Officer Rebecca Thompson sat at the defense table, her posture stiff. The arrogance she'd worn like armor the day before was gone. Her uniform looked heavier now, not as a badge of honor, but as a reminder of the power she'd abused. Her attorney leaned in. "Just answer questions directly. Don't lose your temper," he whispered. But her eyes were already red. She hadn't slept. The headlines had torn through her reputation. The same public she once believed feared her now demanded her punishment. Marcus adjusted his glasses, looking directly at her. "Officer Thompson, please rise." She stood slowly. "Do you understand the charges filed against you?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you wish to make a statement before this court reviews the evidence?" She hesitated. I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said weakly. You disrespected me." I reacted. Marcus leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "And you believe that reaction justified striking a federal judge? Or anyone, for that matter?" Thompson didn't answer. He pressed a button on his monitor. The courtroom screens flickered to life. Footage played again, from multiple angles. The slap. The shove. The words. The silence afterward. When it ended, the room was utterly still. Marcus let the silence stretch, the kind that makes truth impossible to escape. Then, in a low, steady voice, he began. "Officer Thompson, you said something yesterday that echoed in my mind all night. People like you don't belong in places like this." He stood, stepping out from behind the bench, something judges rarely did. "You're right about one thing: actions have consequences. And today, yours arrive." The courtroom buzzed softly, the reporters leaned forward. "Based on the evidence presented before this court, including your own recorded conduct, I find you guilty of assault in the first degree, a felony carrying a maximum sentence of 15 years in state prison." The gavel struck once. Thompson's knees wobbled. Her attorney closed his eyes. "I find you guilty of assault on a federal judicial officer, a federal felony with a mandatory minimum of 10 years in federal custody." Another strike. Gasps rippled through the room. "I find you guilty of deprivation of civil rights under color of law, punishable by up to life in prison when those actions involve violence and racial bias." He paused, his tone tightening. "And finally, I find you guilty of perjury, for your deliberate false statements during this investigation." The room erupted in murmurs. Every word felt like a blow, not just to her, but to the old illusion of untouchable authority. Marcus's expression softened slightly, not with sympathy, but with something deeper: truth. "But Officer Thompson, this case was never just about you. You are not the disease, you are a symptom of a broken system that has allowed arrogance to replace accountability." He turned toward the gallery, his voice rising with passion. "For too long, officers have acted with impunity, believing their badge shields them from consequence. That ends today. Justice is not selective. Justice has no favorites. And today, justice will remember your victims." Thompson broke, her body trembling, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't know it would come to this." Marcus looked down at her, eyes steady. "Your apology is 23 years and countless victims too late." He raised the gavel high, the symbol of justice gleaming under the lights. "Officer Rebecca Thompson, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel came down with a thunderous crack. For a moment, the courtroom was utterly silent. Then applause erupted, quiet at first, then roaring. Reporters captured tears, cheers, and disbelief. Justice had finally stood up to power, and power had fallen silent. The next morning, the courthouse was overflowing. Reporters lined the marble halls, officers stood stiff at the back, and citizens pressed shoulder to shoulder in the gallery. Everyone wanted to witness the same question answered: would the system finally judge one of its own? Judge Marcus Washington stepped through the side door in his black robe, calm as stone. The murmur in the room died instantly. He took his seat, eyes steady, voice level. This court is now in session. Officer Rebecca Thompson rose at the defense table, her badge removed, wrists trembling. The arrogance that once lived behind her stare was gone, replaced by fear and disbelief. Marcus began quietly, almost conversational. "Officer Thompson, do you understand the charges brought against you?" She nodded. Her voice cracked. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you wish to make a statement?" I never meant for it to happen," she whispered. You made me feel disrespected." I reacted. Marcus leaned forward. "Your reaction was violence. And violence from authority is the one thing our Constitution cannot excuse." He pressed a button, the courtroom screens lit up. The video played again, the shove, the slap, the words. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the projector. When the clip ended, Marcus let the silence hang heavy. "Yesterday you said, people like you don't belong in places like this. You were right about one thing: actions have consequences. Today you'll meet yours." He rose from the bench, voice deepening with every charge. "For the assault recorded on video, this court finds you guilty of assault in the first degree, carrying up to 15 years in state prison." A gavel strike echoed. "For the attack on a federal judicial officer, you are guilty under federal statute, with a minimum of 10 years. Another strike. The sound felt like thunder. "For deprivation of civil rights under color of law, this court finds you guilty. Power used to harm is the gravest betrayal of duty." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Thompson's knees weakened, her attorney's eyes dropped to the table. "And for perjury, for the lies you told in sworn testimony, this court finds you guilty." Marcus paused, gaze locked on hers. "But understand this trial was never truly about you. You are a symptom of a deeper disease, a system that protects power instead of people." He turned toward the packed gallery. "For too long, we have excused brutality as procedure. For too long, we've told victims their pain didn't count. That ends today. Justice is not selective. Justice will remember every life you touched." Tears broke down Thompson's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Marcus's voice softened but stayed unyielding. "Your apology comes decades too late. Justice cannot be postponed any longer." He lifted the gavel high. "Officer Rebecca Thompson, you are hereby sentenced to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck, one final, thunderous crack. Then came the sound no courtroom had ever heard before: applause. Long, defiant, unstoppable. Justice had spoken, and this time, it was louder than power. The courtroom was still ringing from the final gavel strike. The echo hung in the air, heavy, final, unforgettable. For a long moment, no one moved. Even the cameras seemed frozen, capturing the face of a woman who had built her career on power, now stripped of it in front of the nation. Officer Rebecca Thompson's lips trembled. Her mind was blank, her world collapsing second by second. The badge that once gave her control now felt like a curse she couldn't remove. 2 U.S. Marshals stepped forward. Her hands shook as they clasped the cold steel cuffs around her wrists. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Marcus looked down at her, not with hatred, but with an expression of something far heavier: disappointment. "Justice isn't revenge," he said quietly. "It's balance. Remember that, even when the world feels like it's closing in." She couldn't answer. Tears streamed down her face as the marshals guided her toward the back exit. For the first time in her career, she wasn't walking out of a courthouse, she was being let out. Outside, hundreds of people were gathered on the courthouse steps. Protest signs waved, camera flashes strobed through the crowd, and chants filled the air. Justice for Marcus. Accountability for all. As Thompson was placed into the transport van, a reporter shouted, "Officer Thompson, do you have any regrets?" She hesitated, voice breaking. "Yeah. I thought the badge made me untouchable." The doors slammed shut behind her. Inside the courthouse, Marcus sat alone in his chambers. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only exhaustion and quiet relief. On his desk lay two things, the written verdict and a small photograph of his late father, a civil rights lawyer who had once told him, "One day, son, you'll change the system from within." He finally allowed himself a small, tired smile. "Guess we did it, Dad," he whispered. Moments later, his assistant knocked. "Sir, the press is waiting outside. The people want to hear from you." Marcus stood, straightened his robe, and walked toward the door. When he stepped out, the crowd erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Flashlights danced across his face, but his expression stayed humble. He raised a hand, signaling for quiet. "Today wasn't about me," he said into the microphones. "It was about the principle that no one, not even those in uniform, stands above the law." The crowd cheered louder. As the camera panned back, the courthouse stood tall against the evening sun, a symbol reborn, bathed in golden light. Justice had prevailed, and for once, the world had witnessed it. And that's how one man reminded the world what justice truly means. It wasn't about power, or pride, or revenge, it was about accountability. About proving that even when the system fails, courage can still bring it back to life. 6 months later, Marcus's verdict sparked reforms across the country. Body cameras became law. Complaints were reopened. And for the first time in decades, people began to believe that justice could, once again, speak for everyone. The courthouse where it all happened now bears his name, a reminder that one voice, backed by truth, can change everything. If this story moved you, drop a Dove Justice in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more real stories where courage triumphs over corruption. Because justice may be slow, but it never stays silent.